The girl they left behind the market street was loud and full of life, but in one corner, near a cracked wall, sat a girl no one noticed. Her name was Rasha. She had no legs, only a small rusted frame of metal that helped her move a little. People walked past her without looking, their eyes sliding away as if she was a shadow. Some whispered cruel words, not caring if she heard, "She's broken. Not even good for breeding." Others laughed softly, calling her useless, a waste of food. Rasha kept her eyes low, pretending she did not hear. Though each word cut deep inside her, her hands, thin and rough, were busy fixing a small, broken toy she had found in the trash. She sold such things for scraps, enough to buy a little bread, maybe a cup of thin soup. It was not living, only surviving. She had learned long ago that in this city, no one helped the weak unless they could use them. That morning, the sun was weak, hiding behind pale clouds. The air smelled of spices and smoke. Voices mixing with the sound of clinking metal from the blacksmith's shop. Rasha tried to ignore her hunger, focusing on the tiny gears in her hand. Then footsteps stopped in front of her. She looked up, ready to see another face full of pity or disgust. Instead, she saw a man tall. With the rough clothes of a traveler, he was not one of her people. His skin was lighter, his hair shorter, his eyes sharp but kind. A human, she thought with surprise. Humans came here sometimes, usually to trade or fix machines, but they rarely spoke to her. The man crouched down so their eyes met. "Do you need help?" he asked in a voice that was calm, not mocking. Rasha blinked, unsure what to say. "No one can help me," she whispered. Her voice was small, almost lost in the noise of the market, but the man did not leave. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Rasha, and I'm Daniel," he said, giving a small smile. It felt strange to hear someone speak her name without disgust. Daniel glanced at the broken toy in her hands. "You're good with small machines?" he said, watching her fingers work. Rasha shrugged. "I fix what I find. It's the only way to eat." He nodded, then looked at her metal frame. It was old, bent, and clearly painful to use. "Who made that?" "He asked my father before he died," she said quietly. "No one else would bother." Daniel was silent for a moment, as if thinking. Then he said something that made her look up in shock. "I can build you better legs," for a second. She thought she had misheard better legs. People here would not give her a coin, let alone something so valuable. She gave a bitter laugh. "No one builds anything for free. I'm not asking for payment," he replied simply. She narrowed her eyes. "Then why?" He held her gaze. "Because I can, and because you deserve better." The words hit her like a sudden warmth, and she didn't know how to answer. The market noise seemed to fade for a moment. But then she remembered the truth. Kindness often had a price. Still, something in his face made her believe. Just a little, even if you could. "I wouldn't be able to pay you back," she said. Daniel shook his head. "You don't need to." Rasha looked away, unsure if she should trust him. The world had taught her to fear offers like this, but deep inside, a small spark of hope flickered. She had not felt that in years. A shadow moved in the corner of the street. A tall, alien male, his eyes fixed on Rasha and the human. His mouth twisted in a sneer. He watched them closely, but said nothing. Rasha did not notice him, but Daniel's gaze shifted for a moment. Then he looked back at her. "If you want, come to my workshop tomorrow. I'll show you what I mean." She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Her heart was beating fast. Though she didn't know if it was fear or hope, Daniel stood, gave her one last nod, and walked away into the crowd. Rasha sat there, the broken toy still in her hand. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about hunger. She was thinking about legs, about walking, and wondering if the human meant what he said. The next day, The market was busy again. Voices mixing with the smell of hot bread and smoke. Rasha sat in her usual corner, her metal frame cold against the ground. She kept wondering if Daniel would really come back. Most people who promised help never returned, but as the sun climbed higher, she saw him walking toward her through the crowd. He carried a small bag and wore a simple tool belt around his waist. "Morning, Rasha," he said with an easy smile. She blinked. No one greeted her like that. "You came," she whispered, almost surprised. "I said I would," he replied. Daniel looked around the market, then crouched beside her again. "I have a workshop at the edge of the city, away from the noise," he said. "I can start making your legs there." Rasha's heart jumped, but doubt quickly followed. "Why?" she asked again, her voice sharper this time. He tilted his head. "Why not?" "You don't know me. I'm nothing to you," she said. Daniel's eyes softened. "You're someone who deserves a chance, and I have the skills to give it to you." The words were simple, but they wrapped around her like a blanket. Still, she couldn't help but feel a wall of caution. "No one helps for nothing," she said again. Almost like she was reminding herself. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "If you want to help me with small repairs while I work, that's enough." The thought of working in a real workshop made her curious, but she remembered. "The way people stared yesterday, people will talk," she murmured. "Let them." Daniel said without hesitation. "They've already been talking about you for years, right? Did it change anything?" She froze at his blunt truth. No. It had not changed anything, and maybe that was the point. Finally, she gave a small nod. Daniel smiled. "Good. I'll help you get there." He reached out a hand, but she pulled back. "I can manage," she said quickly. Daniel didn't push. Just walked beside her as she moved slowly through the streets on her metal frame. Some aliens paused to watch, whispering to each other. One woman hissed, "Why is she with a human?" Another chuckled. "Maybe he feels sorry for her." Rasha kept her eyes down, pretending not to hear. Daniel ignored them completely, as if their words were meaningless. They left the crowded streets and walked toward the quieter part of the city. The buildings became fewer, and the air smelled cleaner, finally. They reached a small workshop made of stone and metal. The front door was open, and inside she saw tables covered in tools, wires, and strange parts. The smell of oil and warm metal filled the air. Daniel helped her inside, guiding her toward a stool. "This is where I work," he said, "and where I can make your legs." He opened the small bag he had carried and pulled out a thin metal frame with smooth joints. "This is just the start," he explained. "I'll need to adjust it to your body. Make sure it fits perfectly." Rasha touched the metal gently. It was nothing like her old frame. It felt strong but light, smooth instead of rough. "You really can make them?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "And they'll be better than anything you've had before." Her chest tightened, a mix of fear and hope swirling inside as he began to measure her. Rasha noticed how carefully he worked. His hands were steady, his eyes focused. He didn't look at her with pity, only with the attention of someone solving a puzzle. It was strange and comforting. While he worked, he asked her about the market, about the things she repaired. At first, she gave short answers, but slowly she found herself telling him small stories. How she once fixed a child's broken whistle in exchange for half a loaf of bread. How she once made a tiny wind toy spin again, just by using scrap wire. Daniel listened to every word, smiling sometimes, frowning others. It had been years since anyone had truly listened to her. When the first part of the frame was ready, he set it aside. "It'll take time," he said. But each day, we'll get closer." Rasha felt a strange lightness in her chest. She almost smiled, but quickly hid it. "Why do you care?" she asked again. Daniel looked at her seriously. "'Cause I've seen too many people left behind, and I can't walk past it anymore." His voice was quiet but heavy with truth. She lowered her eyes, not knowing how to respond, as the day faded. Daniel walked her back toward the market. The jealous alien from before stood at a corner, his eyes cold. Rasha noticed him this time and felt a shiver. Daniel noticed too, but said nothing. When they reached her corner, he said, "Tomorrow." "Come again, we'll make more progress." She nodded slowly, clutching the thought like a treasure. For the first time in years, tomorrow did not feel the same as today. The next morning, the air was cool and still. Rasha made her way to Daniel's workshop, her old metal frame clinking softly against the stone path. She was nervous, though she didn't fully understand why. Maybe it was because no one had ever promised her something this big before, and she was afraid of what it would feel like if the promise was broken. When she reached the workshop, Daniel was already inside. He was bent over a table, his hands moving quickly as he tightened small bolts into place. The sound of tools echoed in the quiet space. "You're early," he said, without looking up. "I didn't want to waste your time," she replied. Daniel glanced at her, a faint smile on his face. "You won't waste my time, Rasha." He motioned for her to sit on a high stool. Beside him lay two sleek metal limbs, curved and shaped like real legs. The joints were smooth, the surface polished until it shone. Rasha's breath caught in her throat. "There?" "Beautiful," she whispered. "They're yours," Daniel said simply. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the cool metal. Her heart pounded. She had imagined new legs, but never like this. Daniel began adjusting the frames to match the shape of her body. His hands worked carefully, tightening straps and checking each joint. "You'll need to learn how to balance," he explained. "It won't be easy at first, but once you learn, you'll walk, run, maybe even dance." The last word made her laugh, a short, surprised sound. "Dance? I've never even walked properly," she said. "Then it's about time," he replied. When the fitting was done, Daniel stepped back. "Ready?" he asked. Rasha took a deep breath and nodded. He helped her stand, his hands steady under her arms. For the first time in her life, her body rose to its full height. She felt strange, taller than she had ever been. Her legs shook under her weight, but Daniel's grip kept her steady. "Try taking a step," he said softly. Her first step was clumsy. The metal joints clicked. Her balance wavered. She almost fell, but Daniel caught her. Again, he encouraged. This time, she took 2 steps before stumbling. Each time she moved, it felt a little more natural. Minutes turned into an hour, and sweat formed on her brow. But she kept going, refusing to give up, and then, without thinking, she walked 5 full steps on her own. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. I did it," she whispered. Daniel grinned. "You did." She kept practicing until her legs felt heavy. Finally, Daniel told her to rest, and she sank onto the stool. Her chest was still rising and falling fast, but her heart was light. It was like a door had opened inside her, a door she never thought existed. Later, Daniel asked if she wanted to try walking outside. She hesitated, knowing the streets would be full of eyes. But a boldness she didn't recognize pushed her to agree. They stepped into the sunlight together. At first, people only glanced at her. Then they noticed Rasha was walking. Whispers rose in the crowd. Some faces showed shock, others disbelief. But among them was one face twisted in anger, the jealous alien from before. He stood still, his eyes following her every move. Rasha felt his gaze like a cold wind on her back. Daniel leaned toward her. "Ignore them. This is your moment." She lifted her chin slightly and took another step. The sound of her new legs meeting the stone street was sharp and clear, and for the first time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like the girl left behind, When they returned to the workshop, Daniel began making small adjustments to improve her balance. As he worked, she sat watching him, wondering why this human had chosen to help her. Most people passed by without a second glance, but Daniel had stopped, and that single choice had changed everything. That night, as she lay on her small bed, she kept flexing her new legs. Feeling the smooth movement of the joints, her thoughts kept drifting to the future, a future where she could walk freely. Go anywhere, do anything for the first time. In years, she let herself believe that her life could be more than survival, but in the dark corner of her mind, the memory of the jealous alien's stare remained. She didn't know what he would do next, only that he was not done watching. Days turned into weeks, and Rasha's steps grew steadier at first. She needed Daniel's arm for support, but soon she could walk the length of the workshop without touching anything. Sometimes she even forgot she had ever crawled on the cold streets. Each morning, she came early, helping Daniel clean tools and organize parts before he began work on bigger repairs. They rarely spoke about why he was helping her, but the question stayed in her mind like an unspoken weight. One evening, the sky was heavy with dark clouds. The streets outside were almost empty as rain began to fall. Rasha stayed later than usual, helping Daniel fix a broken water pump. When they finally finished, thunder rumbled far away, and she realized she didn't want to leave just yet. She sat on a stool near the workbench, watching him put tools away. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly, her voice quiet. Daniel looked up, his brow furrowed. "Do what?" "Help me," she said. "Give me legs. Give me something no one else ever even thought about." For a moment, he didn't answer, just stood there, his hands resting on the table. Then he leaned back against the bench and let out a slow breath. "I had a sister," he said, his tone softer now. "She was younger than me, smart, kind, but she got sick during the war." Rasha's eyes fixed on him, hearing something raw in his voice. "I couldn't save her," he continued. "I tried everything, but I was too late." He looked at her, his eyes steady. "When I saw you, sitting there alone, I couldn't just walk past Rasha." Her chest tightened, and she felt her throat grow warm. It was not pity she saw in his eyes, but something else, a kind of promise. She didn't know what to say, so she reached out and placed her hand on his. It was a small touch, but it felt heavier than words. The rain outside grew louder, the steady patter filling the silence between them. Daniel didn't pull his hand away. "You deserve more than what they've given you," he said quietly. "And I think you've deserved it your whole life." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. It felt like a light was breaking through a place that had been dark for too long. Outside, the door rattled against the wind. Daniel moved to check it, but when he opened it slightly, he saw movement across the street. A tall figure stood under the shadows of a balcony, watching. It was the jealous alien, his eyes glinting. Faintly in the dim light, Daniel closed the door slowly. Locking it this time. "Was that someone you know?" he asked. Rasha hesitated, then nodded. "He doesn't like me being with you." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't press further. Instead, he pulled a blanket from a shelf and handed it to her. "It's raining hard, you should stay here tonight," he said. Rasha hesitated only a moment before nodding. They ate a simple meal together, bread, soup, and a little dried meat. She listened to the sound of rain hitting the roof, feeling oddly safe inside the workshop. Daniel sat across from her, talking about machines he had worked on, strange worlds he had visited. She found herself smiling more than she expected, even laughing once when the lanterns were turned low. She lay down on a small cot in the corner. She could hear Daniel moving around, still working on something at the bench. Her eyes grew heavy. But before sleep took her, she whispered, "Daniel." "Thank you." He glanced over his shoulder and gave a small nod. "Rest, Rasha. That night, she dreamed she was running. Her legs, her real legs, carried her across green fields under a bright sun. When she woke, the sound of rain was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of morning. Daniel was already up, brewing something warm in a pot. "Tea?" he asked, holding out a cup. She took it, smiling faintly for the first time. She realized she didn't just want his help, she wanted his presence. But outside, somewhere in the city, the jealous alien was still watching, and soon he would act. The city was waking slowly under a pale morning sun. Merchants rolled out their carts, voices rose in the market square, and the smell of baking bread drifted through the streets. Rasha walked beside Daniel, her steps steady on the new legs he had built for her. The metal joints moved smoothly now. No longer stiff or awkward, she carried a small basket filled with tools, planning to help him repair a machine for one of the shopkeepers. But even in the warm light of morning, she felt a shadow following her every time she glanced over her shoulder. She caught glimpses of the jealous alien. He kept his distance, his eyes fixed on them like a predator watching its prey. Daniel noticed too, his jaw tightening slightly, but he didn't say anything. They had both learned that ignoring gossip was easier than feeding it. When they reached the shop, Daniel began working. Leaving Rasha outside to wait, she leaned against the wall, her fingers running absently over the smooth metal of her legs. That was when she heard footsteps approach, heavy, purposeful. She turned and found herself face to face with the jealous alien. His name was Carvin, a traitor known for his sharp tongue and cruel humor. But today, there was no humor in his eyes, only anger. "You think walking makes you equal to the rest of us," he said, his voice low and harsh. Rasha's hands tightened on the basket. "I'm not here to prove anything," she replied. Carvin stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You shame our kind. Crawling to a human for scraps, letting him change you." She tried to step back, but her heel brushed the wall. "Trapping her, I owe him my life," she said firmly. Carvin's eyes narrowed. "And what do you give him in return?" Before she could answer, two more figures appeared. Carvin's friends, both broad-shouldered and carrying the smell of stale drink. They fanned out, blocking the narrow street. One of them smirked. "Heard you think you're special now?" Rasha's heart pounded, her grip on the basket tightening. "I don't want trouble," she said quietly. Carvin leaned forward, his voice almost a growl. "Trouble's already here." Without warning, he shoved her hard. Her balance wavered. The new legs clanged against the ground as she caught herself. Pain shot through her hip, but she stayed standing. Carvin sneered. "Not so steady after all?" The other two laughed, one kicking at her leg with a sharp clang of metal. The sound made her flinch, fear and anger mixing in her chest. Then a voice cut through the air. Enough. Daniel's tone was like steel. He stood in the shop doorway, a wrench in one hand, his eyes fixed on Carvin. "She's with me," Daniel said. Stepping forward, Carvin chuckled. "That's the problem." Daniel didn't hesitate. He moved to Rasha's side. Placing himself between her and the three aliens. "Walk away," he warned. But Carvin only smiled. Or what? Human. The street was too narrow, the tension too thick. Carvin lunged first, shoving Daniel's shoulder, but Daniel didn't move far. The second alien tried to grab Rasha's arm, and instinct took over. She swung the basket hard, the tools inside. Clattering loudly against his chest, he cursed, stumbling back. Daniel stepped forward, shoving Carvin away with surprising force. The third alien hesitated, glancing at his friends. But Carvin wasn't done. He swung at Daniel, missing by inches as Daniel sidestepped. In the scuffle, one of Rasha's new legs bent at the joint with a sharp crack. She gasped, feeling it buckle under her. Daniel's eyes flashed with anger. "You've done enough," he said, his voice low but dangerous. Carvin spat on the ground. This isn't over. With a glare at Rasha, he turned and walked away. His two friends following, the sound of their footsteps faded, but the tension remained. Daniel knelt by Rasha, checking the damage to her leg. "It's bent, but I can fix it," he said. Rasha's hands were trembling, her breath quick and shallow. "I thought they were going to." She stopped, not finishing the sentence. Daniel's voice softened. "I won't let anyone hurt you." He helped her stand, supporting her weight all the way back to the workshop inside. The familiar scent of oil and metal wrapped around her. Like safety, Daniel set her on the stool and began working on the damaged leg. Rasha watched him in silence, her heart still racing. When he finished, he looked up and said quietly, "They don't get to decide your worth, Rasha. You do." She swallowed hard, feeling the truth of his words settle deep inside her. But she also knew Carvin's threat wasn't just words. And he would be back. Weeks passed, and the memory of Carvin's attack began to fade. Though the warning in his eyes stayed with Rasha, Daniel had repaired her leg the same day, making it even stronger than before. She walked the streets with more confidence now, her head held higher. Some still whispered. But others had begun to look at her differently. They saw her walking with Daniel, carrying tools, helping in his workshop, and for the first time, she was not only the girl without legs, she was someone with purpose. Rasha found herself smiling more often, even laughing at small things. She could fetch supplies from the market, deliver repaired items, and help Daniel on big projects. Sometimes she caught herself humming while she worked. Daniel noticed, though he never teased her about it. One morning, while she was cleaning the workbench, she felt a strange wave of dizziness. She sat down quickly, pressing a hand to her forehead. Daniel turned from the table, concern in his eyes. "You all right?" "Just lightheaded," she murmured. He frowned. "You've been pale for a few days now." Later that afternoon, a local medic came by to collect a fixed water purifier. Daniel asked him quietly to check on Rasha. She protested, saying she was fine, but the medic insisted after a few questions and a careful examination. He looked at her with a small smile. "You're not sick," he said. Rasha blinked in confusion. "Then what is it?" "You're expecting a child." The medic replied gently, her breath caught. The words echoing in her mind. She had been told her whole life that she could never have children. Her people believed she was too weak, too damaged to bring life into the world, and yet, here she was, hearing the impossible. Daniel stood still for a moment. Then his face broke into a slow smile. "They were wrong," he said softly, looking at her. Rasha's hands trembled as she touched her stomach. I didn't think this could ever happen," she whispered. "You deserve every good thing that can happen," Daniel said firmly. That night, they sat together in the workshop, the lantern casting warm light over the walls. Rasha still felt dazed. But there was a quiet joy in her chest. She thought about all the years she had been told she was worthless, unfit, and now, inside her, life was growing. She looked at Daniel, his hands busy polishing a gear. "You've given me more than legs," she said suddenly. Daniel glanced up. "What do you mean?" "You've given me a future," she said, her voice steady. He didn't reply right away. But the warmth in his eyes told her everything. Over the next days, Rasha noticed a change in herself. She was more protective, more careful. Daniel, too, seemed more watchful, making sure she didn't carry heavy things or work too long. When she protested, he only said, "You're not just looking after yourself now." And though she rolled her eyes, his words stayed with her. But outside their small world, whispers were turning into rumors. Carvin had heard, and his bitterness deepened. Some claimed Rasha had betrayed her people by choosing a human. Others called it unnatural. Rasha tried to ignore them, but she could feel the tension building. Daniel knew it too. He had the look of someone preparing for trouble. One afternoon, While they were working quietly, Daniel paused and said, "When the baby comes, do you want to stay here?" Rasha looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" "There are other places," he said. "Places where no one will judge you, where you can walk the streets without feeling eyes on your back." The thought was tempting, but Rasha shook her head slowly. "This is where they said I would never be more than broken. I want them to see they were wrong." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then we'll stay. In the evenings, they would walk outside. The cool air carrying the smell of baked bread from the market. Sometimes people stopped them to ask about her legs. She answered with quiet pride, showing how the joints moved. And though not everyone approved, she saw fewer faces twisted in disgust. Some were even curious, maybe even respectful. But deep down, Rasha knew Carvin was not finished. He had been humiliated before, and men like him didn't forget. The day he returned would come, and when it did, she would not face him crawling on the ground. She would face him standing tall, with Daniel at her side. The day came quietly, without warning. The market was loud as usual, vendors calling out prices, children weaving through the crowd, and the smell of cooked meat filling the air. Rasha walked beside Daniel, her steps confident, her new legs gleaming. In the sunlight, she held a small basket of fresh bread, her other hand resting gently over her stomach. People looked at her, some with curiosity, some with a hint of respect, but today she didn't lower her eyes. Then, from the far side of the street, Carvin appeared. He moved with slow, deliberate steps, his eyes locked on her. The crowd seemed to sense something, their voices dropping. Daniel shifted slightly, putting himself between Rasha and the approaching figure. Carvin stopped a few feet away, his mouth curling into a cold smile. "So it's true," he said, his voice carrying over the quiet. "You carry a half-breed child." Rasha felt the old sting of shame trying to rise, but she forced it down. She straightened her back, her voice steady. "I carry my child." Carvin's eyes narrowed. "You disgrace our people, Rasha. You shame our bloodline." Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice calm but firm. "You don't get to decide her worth." Carvin's gaze shifted to him. "You should leave this planet, human, before you're forced to." The crowd had gathered now, whispering among themselves. Some leaned closer, eager to see what would happen. Rasha took a deep breath and stepped out from behind Daniel. Her new legs moved smoothly, the sound of their steps sharp against the stone street. "I used to crawl past you," she said, her voice loud enough for all to hear. "And you looked at me like I was nothing." Carvin's smile faded, replaced by a scowl. "You were nothing," he spat. She took another step forward, her hands still on her stomach. "And now, I am more than you will ever be." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Carvin's fists clenched, but Rasha didn't stop. "This man," she said, nodding to Daniel, "gave me legs when you gave me insults. Gave me a life when you gave me nothing." She reached for Daniel's hand, pulling it to rest on her stomach. "And now we are building a family," she said, her voice steady, "whether you like it or not." The crowd's whispers grew louder, some voices sounding almost approving. Carvin looked around. Realizing the support he had expected wasn't there, his sneer faltered, and for the first time, he seemed smaller. He took a step back, muttering, "This isn't over," before disappearing into the crowd. But his words felt hollow. Rasha knew this was the end. Daniel squeezed her hand, his eyes warm with pride. "You didn't need me to fight for you," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "No. But I wanted you beside me." They walked through the market together, the crowd slowly parting to let them pass. Some nodded at her, others simply stared, but none looked at her the way they once had. Not as the girl without legs, but as a woman who stood tall. That evening, as the sun dipped low, they sat outside the workshop. The sky was painted with soft gold and pink. Rasha leaned against Daniel's shoulder, her hand resting over her stomach. "What now?" he asked, his voice gentle. She thought for a moment, then said, "We live. We raise our child. And we never let them forget who we are." Daniel smiled. "And who are we?" Rasha's eyes sparkled in the fading light. "We're the ones they left behind. And the ones who kept walking anyway." The wind carried the scent of the market into the quiet street. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang. Marking the close of another day, Rasha closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the steady beat of life. Inside her, she had been told she was useless, unwanted, broken. Now, she was none of those things. She was a mother, a partner, and a woman who had learned to stand. And beside her was a man who had given her more than legs. He had given her the future she chose.